Hello, dear members of the Soul Stories family. Today we will bring you a romantic, healing love story. Let's start. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. Part 1. The Fateful Funeral. Rain fell lightly, each droplet seeping through Emma's tangled hair, trickling down her cheeks and mingling with her tears. She stood before a simple oak coffin where Margaret, her adoptive aunt, her second mother, the only person who had ever truly considered her family, now rested in peace. In Emma's hand was a single white carnation, its fragile petals trembling like her own heart at that moment. It was Margaret's favorite flower, the kind she used to grow in the small garden behind the house, a place that had once been a sanctuary for them both. But now that garden existed only in memory, and Margaret had left her forever. The crowd around her murmured condolences, but to Emma it was all just distant, muffled noise. She felt lost, like a dry leaf drifting in a cold stream. Margaret's death had come too suddenly, a stroke in the rainy night, with no last words, no warning signs. Emma still remembered the way Margaret smiled so gently, her frail hands stroking Emma's hair as she said, "You are my light." Now that light was gone, leaving her in darkness. The priest began reciting a prayer, his warm voice unable to soothe the ache in Emma's chest. She bowed her head, her glossy black shoes slick with rain slipping on the cold stone ground. A sudden gust of wind blew through, carrying a bone-chilling cold that threw her off balance. Emma stumbled, the carnation slipping from her hand as she fell forward, bracing herself to hit the ground. But she didn't. A pair of strong hands caught her just in time, pulling her into a warm embrace amidst the mournful scene. Time seemed to stop. Emma caught a familiar scent, faint pine wood mixed with the bitter edge of black coffee, a smell she had once loved so deeply it was etched into her soul. The man held her tightly, his breath brushing against her hair, and as her tears fell harder, he whispered in a hoarse voice, "She was everything to me, too." Emma looked up, her misty eyes struggling to make out the face before her. He wore a long black coat, his wet hair plastered to his forehead, but those eyes, deep, sharp, yet tender, made her heart skip a beat. It was Liam from 4 years ago. Liam, the man she had once loved more than herself, the one who had abandoned her without explanation, leaving her with a pain she could never shake. He was here at Margaret's funeral, holding her as if he had never left. She pushed him away, stepping back, her breath ragged. "You..." Her voice trembled, caught between anger and shock. But before she could say more, a small clink broke the silence. The silver necklace, a keepsake from Margaret, given to her on her 18th birthday, slipped from her collar and fell onto the wet stone. Its carnation-shaped pendant glinted faintly in the dim light, a quiet reminder of the woman who was gone. Liam bent down to pick it up before Emma could react. His trembling fingers brushed the pendant, his eyes flickering with an indescribable pain, as if he weren't just picking up an object, but a piece of memory. He looked at the necklace, then at her, his lips pressed tight as if holding something back. Emma froze. Why was he here? How did he know the meaning of this necklace? Margaret had never mentioned any connection between her and Liam after he disappeared. "Give it back," Emma said, her voice icy, snatching the necklace from his hand. She didn't want to look at him for another second. 4 years ago, he had left her with a single short message. "I don't deserve you. Don't look for me." No explanation, no call, not a single glance back. She had cried until her tears ran dry, questioned what she had done wrong, blamed herself for not being enough to keep him. And now he stood here, at the funeral of the person she loved most, acting as if nothing had happened. Liam didn't resist when she took the necklace. He just stood there, his sad eyes fixed on her, his hands hanging limply as if he had lost everything. "Emma," he called her name, his voice low and rough, but she turned away, walking quickly toward the coffin, trying to hide her racing heart. The crowd began to disperse, the sound of rain drowning out everything, but his voice cut through from behind, clear and resolute. "You don't have to forgive me, but at least let me say goodbye to her with you." Emma stopped, her back stiffening. She turned around, looking at him through the thin veil of rain. Liam stood there, drenched, his eyes red but unwavering. Her? Emma repeated, her voice choked. You mean Margaret? Were you close to her? She didn't understand. Margaret had never mentioned Liam after he left. She had simply stayed by Emma's side, caring for her silently, as if trying to ease her pain without words. Liam nodded, stepping closer slowly, but keeping enough distance so she wouldn't feel threatened. She wasn't just your aunt, he said, his voice heavy. She once saved me from myself. Emma frowned, her mind spinning with questions. But before she could ask more, the priest approached, announcing that the final rites were about to begin. Emma turned away, unwilling to face him any longer. She needed time to process what was happening, to sort through the chaos of emotions inside her. When the ceremony ended, Emma stood silently by Margaret's grave, clutching the wilted carnation tightly. She heard soft footsteps behind her. It was Liam. He said nothing, only placed another white carnation beside the grave before turning to leave. Emma watched his figure fade into the rain, her heart aching. Who was he to Margaret? And why, after everything, had he appeared at her weakest moment? She didn't know that the answers lay hidden in letters Margaret had kept secret, waiting for the day they would be revealed. The funeral ended, but the story between her and Liam had only just begun. Part 2, The Past, an Unfinished Love. 4 years ago, Emma was a sophomore living in her own small world, finding peace among the dusty shelves of the Corner Shelf, a bookstore on the outskirts of the city. She worked there part-time, quietly organizing books, breathing in the faint scent of old paper, and feeling safe in its stillness. Her life was simple, like a short poem. Going to school, working, then returning to the warm home of Margaret, her adoptive aunt who had taken her in after her mother died of illness. Emma wasn't good at socializing, didn't have many friends, but she cherished the gentleness of those quiet days. That is, until Liam appeared, bringing with him a warmth like the sun breaking through after a rainy afternoon. It was a day of pouring rain, the sky a gray, unfinished painting. Emma was near the bookstore's door, straightening misplaced books, when the wind chimes jingled. A tall, lanky young man stepped inside, his white shirt clinging wetly to his frame, holding a black umbrella with a few broken ribs from the wind. He smiled sheepishly, his messy black hair dripping water onto the wooden floor. "Can I take shelter here for a bit?" he asked, his voice low and warm, like a soft melody. Emma nodded, her eyes quietly pointing to a wooden chair near the counter, but her heart stirred faintly at that smile. Liam didn't sit as she expected. He wandered around the bookstore, his fingers brushing lightly over the spines of old books, as if touching something precious. "Do you have The Catcher in the Rye?" he turned to ask, his eyes lighting up with genuine curiosity. Emma nodded, reaching for the book on a high shelf, and as she handed it to him, their fingers brushed. A warmth spread through her, not from the cold, but from his gaze, sharp yet tender, as if it could see into the hidden corners of her soul. "I'm Liam," he said, his smile bright like sunlight piercing the rain. "And you?" "Emma," she replied, her voice soft, almost drowned out by the rain, but he heard her. From then on, Liam became an inseparable part of Emma's days. He was an intern at a design firm nearby, often stopping by the bookstore during lunch breaks, carrying the faint scent of coffee from the old machine in the corner. They started with books. He loved classic novels with their deep stories, while she lost herself in poetry and its dreamy rhythms. He teased her for the careful way she folded page corners, treating them like treasures, and she blushed whenever he suddenly read aloud a line from Neruda, his warm voice wrapping around her heart. Brief chats stretched into endless afternoons, with Liam staying late to help her close the shop, just to hear one more story from her. Their love bloomed quietly, pure like the white carnations in Margaret's garden, not loud or rushed, but gentle like a full moon's light. One day Liam asked Emma to bring him home to meet Margaret, the woman she always spoke of with boundless love. Margaret, with her silver hair and a smile as kind as morning sun, welcomed Liam with a warm hug, as if he were already family. "You look like an umbrella in Emma's storm," she teased, making Emma blush, and Liam laughed brightly. She watched them, her eyes sparkling with joy, as if she could see a radiant future ahead. "You two suit each other," she said, and in that moment, both Emma and Liam felt their hearts tremble. Margaret wasn't just a witness, she nurtured their love. One summer afternoon, she pulled Liam into the garden, teaching him to plant carnations, her favorite flower, the ones Emma gazed at every morning. "Girls like flowers, but they'll love them more if the one planting them is the one they love," she whispered to him, winking playfully. Liam clumsily wielded the shovel, dirt staining his shirt, but he patiently dug small holes, his eyes shining as each plant took root. That evening, he brought a small pot of flowers to the bookstore, setting it before Emma with a shy but warm smile. "For you," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. Emma cradled the pot, her heart racing, feeling as if the whole world were blooming in her hands. The months that followed were a string of simple, beautiful happiness, like a poem without words. They walked together in the rain, hands clasped, Liam's black umbrella shielding them both, their laughter blending with the sound of falling drops. They sat in Margaret's garden, listening to her tales of youth, laughing together when she playfully grumbled about Liam accidentally trampling a flower bed. Every look they shared was clear and pure, every touch warm, as if their love were a small flame. Not blazing, but enough to warm them through cold days. Emma had never felt her life so complete. She believed Liam would always be by her side, like the umbrella Margaret had mentioned, not just shielding her from rain, but protecting her heart. But that pure happiness was as fragile as a petal in the wind. One winter morning, when Emma opened her phone with a smile still lingering on her lips, she saw a message from Liam. "I don't deserve you. Don't look for me." No call, no goodbye, no warning. She called him dozens of times, but his number was disconnected. She ran to his company, legs trembling in the cold, only to hear he'd quit and left the city. Emma crumbled. She sat in the bookstore, clutching the wilting carnation pot, tears falling silently like the rain outside. She wondered what she'd done wrong, why the pure love she'd given was met with such cruel silence. Emma returned home, collapsing into Margaret's arms, sobbing like a child who'd lost her most precious thing. Margaret said nothing, just held her tight, her frail hands stroking Emma's hair, quietly wiping away her tears. "Why did he leave, Aunt?" Emma asked, her voice breaking in pain. Margaret smiled sadly, a flicker of sorrow in her eyes that Emma didn't catch. "Some people leave not because they stop loving, but because they don't know how to stay," she replied, her voice gentle, as if comforting them both. Emma didn't ask more, bearing her pain in the quiet days that followed, resolving to lock her heart away, never to open it again. The last carnation withered, and Emma tucked it into a hidden corner of the house, along with her memories of Liam, a beautiful but unfinished love. She didn't know that, while she suffered, Margaret quietly kept in touch with him, still hoping he'd return with a stronger heart. But she never told Emma, believing time would be the gentlest teacher, guiding them back to each other. 4 years passed, the pain slowly fading, but the memory of that pure love remained like a white carnation, forever blooming in Emma's heart. She never imagined that, at Margaret's funeral, Liam would reappear, bringing secrets and a chance to rewrite their unfinished story. Part 3. The reason for the separation. The rain continued to fall relentlessly, each heavy drop pounding the makeshift canopy at the cemetery like hammer strikes against Emma's heart. The funeral was over, the crowd had dispersed, and she stood alone by Margaret's grave, clutching the silver necklace so tightly her knuckles turned white. The white carnation Liam had placed beside the grave still lay there, its wet petals trembling in the rain, a silent reminder of his presence. The man she had once loved, once hated, and now didn't know how to face. She had watched him turn and walk away after setting the flower down, his tall, lean figure fading into the gray curtain of rain. But she knew he hadn't gone far. She could feel his gaze somewhere nearby, still watching her, like an invisible thread pulling her back to memories she wanted to forget. Emma took a deep breath, her trembling exhale visible in the cold air, trying to push Liam's image from her mind. She didn't want to face him, didn't want to hear a single word from the man who had abandoned her 4 years ago, leaving her with a cold message and a shattered heart. Questions swirled in her head. What was he doing here? Why show up now when she just lost the most important person in her life? She told herself she didn't care, that he no longer meant anything to her, but deep down a small part of her ached like an old wound that hadn't healed, made raw again by the cold rain. She left the gravesite, heading toward the cemetery gate, her wet shoes squelching on the stone path. She wanted to go home, to retreat to her familiar room where she could lock away her emotions. But as she reached the gate, she froze. Liam was there, standing under a large tree, his black coat soaked and clinging to him, hands shoved in his pockets as if holding something back. He hadn't left as she'd thought. He waited patiently, despite the rain seeping through his clothes, his heavy gaze fixed on her, as if she were the only thing he could see through the misty downpour. "What more do you want?" Emma spoke, her voice cold but unable to hide its tremor, like thin ice masking the storm raging inside. She hugged her coat tighter, keeping her distance, as if his closeness might shatter her. Liam took a step forward but stopped when she stepped back, a flash of pain crossing his eyes. "I just want to talk," he said, his voice hoarse from the cold but still gentle like it used to be, stirring an involuntary pang in her heart. "Just once, Emma." "I don't want to hear it," she cut him off, turning her face away to hide her reddening eyes. "You said enough when you left that flower." Her words were sharp, but inside she was a mess. Anger, hurt, and a flicker of something she didn't dare name. Curiosity. Liam didn't give up. He stood still, his voice rising through the rain, steady yet soft, like a breeze slipping through a closed door. "You have every right to be angry, to hate me. But let me explain. Not for me, for Margaret." At the mention of Margaret's name, Emma froze, as if someone had struck a broken chord in her heart. She turned back, her tear-brimmed eyes meeting his, tears threatening to spill, but held back by a clenched jaw. "Don't use her as an excuse," she snapped, each word a self-inflicted stab to maintain her fragile shield. "You don't deserve to mention her after what you did." But Liam's gaze didn't waver, showing none of the avoidance she'd once imagined. He sighed, his breath forming a white mist in the cold air, and said, "I know I don't deserve it, but she's why I'm here today, and I owe you the truth." Emma fell silent, her heart torn apart. Part of her wanted to walk away, to escape him and the explanations that might shake the walls she'd built over the years. But another part, the part still haunted by him, still wondering why he left, kept her rooted. She stood there in the rain, feeling like the world had shrunk to this moment. Finally she nodded, her voice firm but trembling. "Go ahead, but don't expect me to forgive you." The words were a warning to him and a reminder to herself. "Don't be weak, Emma. Don't let him hurt you again." Liam nodded, a flicker of relief in his eyes, though they remained heavy. He began slowly, his low voice dragging painful memories from his chest. "4 years ago, I didn't want to leave you, but I had no choice." He paused, taking a deep breath, as if the memory were still an open wound. "My father had terminal cancer. My mother left right after the diagnosis, abandoning us with a mountain of debt he'd taken on for treatment. I was the only son, Emma. I had to shoulder it all." Emma frowned, trying to process his words as a whirlwind of emotions churned inside her. She wanted to scream, to ask why he hadn't told her, but her voice caught. "Then why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice shaking, tears streaming down her cheeks beyond her control. Liam gave a sad smile, bitter and pained, his eyes clouding as if revisiting that version of himself. "Tell you for what? So you could worry with me? So you'd have to watch me fail, unable to take care of myself, let alone you. I didn't want to drag you into that hell." "Hell?" Emma shot back, her voice breaking, tears mixing with the rain, blurring her face. "You think abandoning me wasn't hell? Do you know how I lived? I asked myself what I did wrong, blamed myself for not being good enough to keep you." Her words poured out like a wave, carrying the nights she'd cried herself dry, the days she'd stared at the wilting carnation pot, wondering why she wasn't enough to make him stay. She covered her face, trying to hide her weakness, but it spilled out, unstoppable. Liam bowed his head, his fist clenched as if punishing himself. "I know I was wrong. he said, his voice trembling, each word pulled from deep regret. I thought leaving was how I could protect you. I took a job overseas, worked day and night to pay off the debt, so my father could pass in peace. But I didn't realize my silence would hurt you this much. Emma shook her head, incredulous, tears still falling but her voice turning cold. Protect me? You left me with a message, Liam. A message. You didn't give me a chance to understand, to stand by you. You decided everything, as if I had no say. She wiped her tears, but they kept coming, mingling with the rain, a testament to the pain she'd carried for 4 years. Liam stepped closer, his eyes heavy with remorse. I wasn't brave enough, Emma. I was afraid if I told you, you'd insist on staying with me, and I couldn't bear the thought of you suffering because of me. He paused, his voice softening to a confession. But there was one person who never gave up on me. Margaret. Emma froze, looking up at him, her vision blurred by rain and tears. Her? Liam nodded, his gaze softening as he spoke of Margaret. After I left, she found a way to reach me through a mutual friend. She sent letters. Not many, but enough to let me know you were okay. She encouraged me, told me about you, how you still worked at the bookstore, still tended the carnation garden. She said I was your umbrella, and if I couldn't come back, I shouldn't make you lose faith in love. Emma's chest tightened, as if someone had squeezed her heart. Margaret had never told her this. She'd always been there, silently wiping her tears, but never mentioned Liam. Why didn't she tell me, she whispered, almost to herself, her voice lost in the rain. In her mind, Margaret's image surfaced, her gentle smile, her frail hand stroking Emma's hair, and she realized her aunt had quietly protected her in her own way. Because she respected my choice, Liam replied, his voice low and sad. She wanted me to find my own way back when I was strong enough to face you. I couldn't until I heard she'd passed. He looked at her, his eyes full of regret, as if pleading for understanding. I came back to say goodbye to her and to see you. I don't expect forgiveness, Emma. I just want you to know the truth. Emma stood there in the rain, her heart more chaotic than ever. She was angry at Liam for deciding for her, for leaving her to bear the pain alone for 4 years. But she also hurt, realizing he hadn't left because he stopped loving her, but because he tried to protect her in the most clumsy, mistaken way. And Margaret, the person she loved most, had silently bridged them, even after she was gone. It felt like she'd found a missing piece, but it didn't fit the broken picture in her heart. I need time, she said, her voice hoarse as if it took all her strength to speak. I don't know what to do with all this. Liam nodded, not pushing her, a hint of relief in his eyes, but still laced with guilt. I'll wait, he said, stepping back under the tree, his gaze never leaving her, a silent promise. Emma turned away, walking into the rain, clutching the necklace, feeling like her heart had shattered and been patched together, but she didn't know where to place it. The rain kept falling, washing away her tears, and in her mind lingered a wordless question. Could she forgive him? Part 4. The Truth from the Past. The night after the funeral, Emma sat alone in Margaret's small house, a place once filled with laughter and the faint scent of carnations. Now the silence was stifling, broken only by the steady patter of rain on the tin roof. She held the silver necklace in her hands, her thumb tracing the carnation-shaped pendant, searching for some lingering warmth from Margaret. But all she felt was emptiness and unanswered questions about Liam. His explanation in the rain still echoed in her mind. He'd said he left to protect her, that Margaret had quietly kept in touch with him over the years. Emma didn't know how much of his story to believe. Margaret had never told her, never hinted that she maintained a connection with the man who had broken her. Why? Why had she kept it from her? She stood and walked to the corner where Margaret used to sit and read. The old armchair was still there, next to a small wooden table coated in a thin layer of dust. Emma pulled open the drawer, intending to find a cloth to wipe it down, but what she saw made her freeze. A small, intricately carved wooden box, adorned with a delicate carnation design, sat quietly inside. She'd never seen it before. With trembling hands, she lifted it out and opened the lid. Inside was a stack of letters, tied with a faded red ribbon. On top, Margaret's handwritten note made her heart clench. To Emma, when you're ready. Emma sank to the floor, placing the box on her lap, carefully untying the ribbon. The first letter was written in Margaret's familiar slanted script, dated 4 years ago, just weeks after Liam left. She read each line, piercing her heart like a dagger. Dear Emma, I know you're hurting, and I wish I could take that pain away. Liam is gone, but not because he stopped loving you. He left because he wasn't strong enough to hold on to you. I saw him cry when he told me about his father, the debts, and his fear of dragging you into suffering. I don't blame him, but I can't forgive his weakness either. You deserve to be loved fully, not in fragments. Emma paused, tears streaming down her cheeks. Margaret had known everything, Liam's reasons, the tears he'd hidden from her, yet she'd said nothing, staying by Emma's side, wiping her tears each night she cried for him. She turned to the next letter, written a year later. Today I got a letter from Liam. He asked about you, whether you still tend the garden, still work at the bookstore. I told him how strong you've become, even with the scars on your heart. I don't know if he'll return, but I hope one day he'll find the courage to face you. You're my light, Emma, and I believe you're his too. Emma's chest felt heavy. Margaret hadn't just comforted her. She'd been a bridge between her and Liam, all while keeping silent. She read on, each letter a piece of the puzzle revealing a truth she'd never suspected. The final letter, written just months before Margaret's death, took her breath away. Emma, if you're reading this, I'm likely no longer here. I didn't send these letters because I wanted you to find your own answers, to decide your own heart. Liam isn't perfect, but his love for you is real. If he comes back, look into his eyes and you'll know. I only want you to be happy, with or without him. Emma folded the letter, pressing a hand to her chest, feeling as if her heart were breaking and healing at once. Margaret had seen it all, the love, the pain, Liam's weakness, and her own strength. She hadn't forced anything, hadn't interfered, just quietly waited for the day they'd find their way back to each other. A memory flashed back, vivid as if it were yesterday. It was a summer afternoon of 4 years ago, when Liam was still with her. They sat in Margaret's garden, him clumsily planting a carnation pot under her guidance. Emma giggled as dirt smeared his shirt, while Margaret watched them with a tender gaze. When Emma went inside to fetch water, she faintly heard Margaret say to Liam, "If you leave, come back when you're worthy. She doesn't need someone who only knows how to love. She needs someone who knows how to stay." Emma opened her eyes, returning to the present. Margaret had foreseen it all. She knew Liam would leave, and she hoped he'd return, not as the weak boy who ran, but as a man strong enough to face her. But had he truly changed? Could she trust him again? She stood and stepped out to the back garden. Under the faint moonlight, the white carnations still bloomed, even without Margaret's care. She knelt, touching a flower, and the image of Liam placing a carnation by Margaret's grave filled her mind. He had come back, as Margaret had wished, but her heart wavered. She wanted to forgive, to believe he'd grown from his mistakes, yet the fear of being hurt again held her back. She returned inside, setting the box of letters on the table, her gaze lingering on Margaret's final words. Look into his eyes and you'll know. Tomorrow she'd see Liam again, not to forgive him yet, but to seek answers. For now she needed sleep, needed time to let her heart settle amid the fragments of the past. Part 5. Close yet distant. After reading Margaret's letters that night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay on the old bed, moonlight filtering through the curtains and casting shadows on the ceiling. But her mind drifted to Margaret's words, to Liam, to the years she thought she'd buried. The next morning, as the sun barely rose, she heard a gentle knock at the door. It was Liam. He stood there holding a paper bag with coffee and bread, his tired eyes lighting up when he saw her. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to see me," he said, his voice hesitant, "but I wanted to help. The memorial for Margaret, I thought you shouldn't do it alone." Emma looked at him, her heart wavering between lingering anger and a strange feeling, as if he'd never left. She wanted to refuse, to tell him to go, but Margaret's words echoed, "Look into his eyes and you'll know." she sighed, opening the door wider. "Come in," she said, her tone cool but not pushing him away. They began preparing for the memorial, a small event Emma wanted to hold in Margaret's honor, not just for herself, but for those who cherished her. Liam didn't say much, quietly following her instructions. They cleaned the house, arranged tables and chairs, and finally went to the back garden, where the white carnations still bloomed resiliently despite the lack of care. Emma knelt, pulling weeds from around a flower bed, while Liam stood nearby, hesitantly asking, "Can I help?" She nodded, avoiding his gaze. Liam grabbed a small shovel from the garden corner and started digging, his movements clumsy but careful, reminiscent of how he'd planted carnations 4 years ago under Margaret's guidance. Emma stole a glance at him, memories flooding back, him covered in dirt, grinning widely after finishing his first pot to give her. She turned away, trying to suppress the emotions welling up inside. By afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows, they sat on the back porch steps, each holding a cup of coffee Liam had brewed. He still remembered how she liked it. Black, no sugar, just a splash of milk. Emma took a sip, the familiar bitterness spreading, pulling her back to days they'd sat in the bookstore, talking until dark. "You still like it this way?" Liam asked, his voice soft, as if afraid to shatter the fragile space between them. "Yeah," she replied curtly, unwilling to let him see her softening. But Liam didn't press. He just smiled, a sad, gentle smile, and turned to look at the garden. "Margaret loved this place," he said. "She once told me carnations aren't just beautiful. They're strong, like you." Emma froze, her fingers tightening around the cup. "Don't talk like you know me," she shot back, her voice hardening. Liam met her eyes, a flicker of pain crossing his. "I don't know everything," he admitted, "but I know how strong you were when I wasn't here, and I regret not staying to see it." She didn't respond, standing to resume work, but his words planted a tiny seed in her heart, stirring an indescribable feeling. The next day, as they set up a small table for Margaret's photo at the memorial, Liam quietly brought a new pot of white carnations, placing it beside the frame. "I grew this where I was staying," he said, his voice tentative. "It's not as nice as Margaret's, but I thought she'd like it." Emma looked at the pot, her heart softening slightly. She said nothing, just nodded, but her gaze gentled. The memorial was simple yet warm. A few neighbors came, sharing memories of Margaret, and Emma stood by, listening, occasionally smiling. Liam stayed until the end, helping her clean up, lingering even as night fell. In the days that followed, Liam kept showing up. He didn't demand anything, didn't push for forgiveness, just stayed by her side like an old friend. One morning, as Emma stepped into the garden, she noticed the wooden fence Margaret had loved, once wobbly with age, now sturdy and repaired. Liam stood there, hammer in hand, sweat rolling down his forehead. "I saw it was about to collapse," he said, scratching his head sheepishly. "Margaret wouldn't have liked that." Emma looked at him, her heart beating faster. That small act reminded her of the old days, when he'd fixed a creaky chair in the bookstore just because she'd complained about the noise. "Thanks," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. Liam smiled, the first truly bright smile since his return. "No big deal," he replied. "I just wanted to do something right, even if it's small." The old feelings began to stir, not loudly but quietly, like carnations blooming in the rain. One evening they shared a simple dinner, bread and soup Liam had cooked. He told her about his time abroad, the sleepless nights working, the moment he nearly gave up but remembered Margaret's words. "Don't make her lose faith in love." Emma listened without interrupting, and for the first time, she felt the anger in her heart begin to fade. But even as they grew closer, Emma kept her distance. One night, as they sat on the armchair in the living room, Liam's hand brushed hers while passing a glass of water. She flinched, her eyes flashing with momentary panic. "You left me once," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't want my heart broken again." Liam looked at her, his eyes heavy. "I know," he replied. "I don't expect you to trust me yet, but I'll prove it with time, Emma. I'm not going anywhere." She didn't answer, turning away, but her heart wasn't as cold as before. In the days that followed, they stayed near each other, not as lovers, but as two people who'd been hurt, learning to heal. Liam still brewed coffee each morning, fixed small things around the house, shared clumsy stories of his life. Emma remained more silent than talkative, but she no longer pushed him away. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden, Liam pointed to a newly bloomed carnation. "See that?" he asked. "It grew from the driest patch. Margaret was right. They're strong." Emma looked at the flower, then at him. "Like me?" she asked, a hint of teasing in her voice. Liam smiled, nodding. "Like you." The distance between them shrank, but it didn't vanish entirely. Emma knew she was softening, knew the old love was rekindling, but fear lingered like an invisible wall. She needed time, and Liam seemed to understand. He didn't rush, didn't push, just stayed by her side, like the umbrella Margaret had described, not perfect, but enough to shield her through stormy days. Part 6. Trials and Choices. In the days following the memorial, the air between Emma and Liam felt like a slow melody. Gentle, yet with low notes neither dared to touch. They tended the carnation garden together, Emma's hands delicately pulling weeds while Liam carefully watered the plants, his gaze occasionally lingering on her in silence. Each morning they brewed coffee in the small kitchen, the familiar aroma weaving an invisible thread back to their past. When rain fell, they sat under the porch, quiet but not stifled, as if each other's presence was enough to soothe the emptiness. Emma no longer pushed him away as she once had, but her heart remained guarded, like an old door cracked open just enough to let in light yet wary of the cold wind. Liam seemed to sense it. He didn't ask for forgiveness or force her to open up, simply staying by her side, his small actions a promise unspoken. But that fragile peace didn't last. One evening, as Emma sat in the living room with an old book of Margaret's in hand, she heard Liam's phone ring from the garden. His voice, low and at times tense, drifted through the slightly open window. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but fragments reached her. "Crisis. New York. No one else can handle it." Emma froze, her fingers tightening on the book's spine, a vague unease rising within her. When Liam stepped inside, his face was shadowed with sadness, his eyes carrying a worry she hadn't seen since his return. He set the phone on the table, rubbing his face as if trying to reorder his chaotic thoughts. "What's wrong?" Emma asked, her voice soft but cautious, like someone teetering on a cliff, afraid one misstep would send her tumbling. Liam sighed, his eyes meeting hers before quickly dropping. "The company I work for in New York is in trouble," he said, his tone low and hesitant. "A big project stalled, and the client's threatening to sue. They need me back right away." Emma felt her chest tighten, as if someone had squeezed the breath from her. She set the book down, her hands trembling slightly, struggling to stay calm despite the storm brewing inside. "Back," she repeated, her voice hoarse, a question that needed no answer. Liam nodded, his gaze fixed on her, as if trying to catch every flicker of emotion on her face. "Just a few weeks," he said quickly, his words rushed as if to reassure them both. "I'll sort it out and come right back. I don't want to go, Emma, but if I don't, the company will collapse, and dozens of people will lose their jobs." She fell silent, her mind spinning like a whirlwind. 4 years ago, he'd left for an unavoidable reason. His father's illness, a broken family, a burden he had to bear. Now history seemed to repeat itself, and the old fear surged within her like a tidal wave, washing away the fragile trust she'd just begun to rebuild. She looked at him, her eyes clouding with painful memories. The cold message, unanswered calls, nights she'd cried herself dry. "So you're leaving again," she said, her voice icy, a thin veneer over a heart cracking anew. Liam stepped forward, reaching for her hand, but she pulled back, a reflex to shield herself from the pain that might come. "It's not like last time," he said, his voice firm, a spark of determination in his eyes. "This time, I'm not running away. I'll come back." But his words were like a stone dropped into the still lake of her heart, rippling with doubt. She gave a faint, bitter smile, her eyes glistening but holding back tears. "You said that 4 years ago, then left me with a message. How am I supposed to trust you now, Liam?" Her voice broke, shedding its cold facade, revealing the pain she'd carried for years. Liam bowed his head, his fists clenching as if punishing himself. "I know I don't have the right to ask you to trust me," he admitted, his voice trembling, each word drawn from the depths of his heart. "But this is different. I'm not leaving out of fear or weakness. I'm going to prove I can build a future. Not just for me, but for us, if you'll give me a chance." His words pierced her like a blade, sweet yet agonizing. Us. The word echoed in her mind, stirring dreams she'd once held. Days she'd thought he'd stay forever. But then she recalled the loneliness after he left, and her heart shrank, Bugan Shang Xin, not daring to believe. Emma looked into his eyes, seeking the truth as Margaret had urged. His gaze didn't waver, pained yet sincere, as if he'd laid his whole heart before her, unguarded and unhidden. But her fear loomed larger, an invisible wall between them. She turned away, struggling to keep her voice steady, despite the trembling in her chest. "So what's your plan?" she asked, her tone quiet but sharp, a challenge. Liam took a deep breath, his hands relaxing, then spoke, his voice low but clear, like a vow. "This time, I want to ask you first. Emma, will you come with me? I don't want to decide alone like before. I want you to choose, stay here or come to New York with me, face this together." His voice softened at the end, a silent plea, his eyes alight with hope, yet tinged with worry. Emma froze, her heart pounding as if it might burst from her chest. Go with him. The thought was both a sweet dream and a terrifying nightmare. She'd once dreamed of standing by his side, facing everything together, hand in hand under the rain like in the old days. But that dream had shattered 4 years ago, leaving her with wordless pain. Now he stood here, offering his hand, but she didn't know if she had the courage to take it. She looked at him, then at the carnation garden through the window, a place holding memories of all three of them, her, Liam, and Margaret. The white flowers, fragile yet resilient, mirrored her at this moment, caught between hope and fear. "I can't," she said, her voice choked, tears welling but held back. "I can't go with you, Liam. Not because I don't want to, but because I don't know if I could survive you leaving me again." Her words cut like a blade, not just into him, but into herself, tearing through the shield she'd built over days. Liam opened his mouth to speak, but she raised a hand to stop him, her eyes resolute despite her trembling hands. "If you really want to stay in my life," she continued, her voice breaking, "come back when you're ready, not for the company, not for any other reason, but because you want to be here, with me." The room fell into a heavy silence, thick like the sky before a storm. Liam looked at her, a flash of pain in his eyes, then a spark of resolve. "Okay," he said, his voice hoarse, as if he just weathered a storm within. "I'll go, but I'll come back. Not in a few weeks, but as soon as I can." "I promise." Emma didn't reply, just nodded, but her heart was a tangle, hope mixed with fear, trust laced with doubt. She wanted to believe him, but the ghost of 4 years ago whispered that promises could vanish like the rain outside. The next morning, Liam prepared to leave. He stood at the door, a small suitcase by his feet, his eyes never leaving Emma. She stood a few steps away, clutching the coffee he'd brewed before going. Still black, no sugar, a touch of milk, like the old days, a thread tying them across time. Liam stepped forward, placing a small carnation pot on the table by the door. Its white petals were delicate, but its roots were sturdy, a silent pledge between them. He pulled a scrap of paper from his pocket, scribbling a few words with shaky hands, then set it beside the pot. "I won't miss you again," he said, his voice firm like a vow, before turning to the waiting taxi. Emma stood there watching the cab disappear down the misty road. She stepped to the table, picking up the note, Liam's brief words making her heart race. "I won't miss you again." She cradled the carnation pot, her fingers brushing its petals, a mix of warmth and chill washing over her. He'd promised, but would he keep it? She didn't know. Her heart was like a flower in the rain, yearning to bloom for the sun, yet fearing the wind might sweep it away. In the days that followed, Emma lived in a strange state, like a tightrope walker between two cliffs. She tended the garden, worked around the house, but her mind always drifted to Liam. She missed how he brewed coffee, its familiar scent like an invisible embrace, how he fixed the fence, his clumsy hands full of care, how he stayed by her side without demanding anything, like a gentle breeze that didn't scatter the flowers but made them sway. She hoped he'd return, but the fear of a broken promise haunted her each night, a shadow creeping into her dreams. Standing before the mirror, she looked into her own eyes, asking, "If he doesn't come back, how will I go on? And if he does, will I dare to open my heart again?" The question looped endlessly, unanswered, yet she couldn't stop hoping. One evening, as rain fell again, Emma sat in the garden, gazing at the carnation pot Liam had left. It still bloomed, even in his absence, proof that love could endure storms. She smiled sadly, whispering to herself, "Margaret, if he doesn't come back, I won't blame you." But deep down, she clung to hope, a fragile hope, like a carnation petal in the rain, yet strong enough to keep her waiting, if only in silence. Part 7. 1 year later. A year had passed since Liam left, taking with him the small carnation pot and a promise scribbled on a scrap of paper. Emma no longer counted the days, but each morning she still looked at the flower on her table, now a thriving little cluster, thanks to her careful tending. She didn't wait for him in the desperate way she had 4 years ago. Instead, she'd learned to live with herself, her scars healing into strength. Margaret had once called her a light, and now she was beginning to believe it. Emma didn't stay in Margaret's old house forever. After Liam left, she spent a few months sorting through things, then turned her longing into action. She opened a small bookstore in the city center, naming it Margaret's Garden. It wasn't large, just a few shelves of old books, a cozy corner for readers, and a wooden table displaying Margaret's keepsakes, the unsent letters, a few photos, and a pot of white carnations always kept fresh. Customers came not just for books, but to hear Emma talk about Margaret, the woman who'd taught her how to love and let go. Her life now was steady, even beautiful. She worked each day, chatted with regulars, and tended a small garden behind the shop, planting more carnations in Margaret's memory. She no longer cried when she thought of Liam, though he remained a part of her, quiet like the shadow of a tree on the path at dusk. She didn't contact him or ask about him through anyone, keeping the pot he'd left as a wordless memory. She told herself that if he didn't return, she'd still be fine. But deep down, she held on to hope, not fierce but gentle, like carnations blooming in the rain. Margaret's first death anniversary arrived, the sky a rare clear blue after months of drizzle. Emma closed the shop early, bringing a bouquet of white carnations to the cemetery. Standing before the grave, she set the flowers down and whispered, "Auntie, I'm okay now. I don't know if Liam kept his promise, but I've learned to be happy without him." She smiled, a soft, certain smile, then headed back to the shop. When she stepped inside, she spotted an envelope on the counter. No stamp, no return address, just her name in a familiar scrawl. Her heart raced. With trembling hands, she opened it, revealing a short letter, a plane ticket, and a small silver ring, its face delicately engraved with a carnation. She read Liam's words, each line stealing her breath. "Emma, I promised I'd return when I was ready, and now I'm ready to stay forever. I've settled everything in New York, not for the company, but because I want to come back to you, with no more reasons to leave. This ticket is for you, if you want to meet me at the airport tomorrow. This ring is my promise, not to make up for the past, but to start a future. I'll wait for you, whether you come or not. Liam." Emma set the letter down, clutching the ring, tears rolling down her cheeks. Not tears of pain, but of a feeling she hadn't thought she'd reclaim. Trust. Liam had kept his word. He wasn't just returning with empty promises. He brought a tangible commitment, a choice for her to make. She looked at the ticket, a flight to the local airport tomorrow, departing at 10 a.m. He was close, maybe already in the city, but he'd left it up to her. She stepped into the garden behind the shop, sitting under the tree's shade, twirling the ring in her fingers. She remembered him brewing coffee, fixing the fence, planting flowers with her. She recalled his eyes when he asked her to come to New York with him, and his final promise before leaving. "I won't miss you again." Over the past year, she'd lived well without him, but now she realized she still wanted him, not to fill a void, but to build something new together. Emma stood, returned to the shop, and grabbed a sheet of paper, writing a few lines. Liam, I'll come. Not because I need you, but because I want to trust you again. Don't let me down. She smiled, placing the note beside the carnation pot he'd left a year ago, then carefully tucked the ring into her pocket. She didn't know what the future held, but this time she was ready to step forward, not with fear, but with hope. That night, Emma slept better than she had all year. She dreamed of Margaret standing in a carnation garden, smiling gently. You chose well, she said, her voice soft as a breeze. When Emma woke, she felt at peace. She packed a small bag, grabbed the bouquet of white carnations, and stepped outside. Tomorrow she'd meet Liam, not to close the past, but to begin a new chapter. Part 8. The End, a Circle of Healing. The morning Emma decided to go to the airport, the sky was clear and blue, not a cloud in sight, a perfect start after months of relentless rain. She wore a simple white dress, holding a bouquet of white carnations from the garden behind Margaret's garden, and slipped the silver ring Liam had sent onto her ring finger. She didn't bring much, just a small bag with a few favorite books and his letter, a reminder that this time she wasn't chasing him out of desperation, but choosing to trust. When the taxi pulled up to the airport, Emma stepped out, taking a deep breath. She glanced at her watch. 9:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the flight time Liam had noted on the ticket. She wasn't sure where he'd be waiting or if he'd truly be there as promised. But as she entered the arrivals hall, she spotted him instantly. Liam stood near the gate, wearing the familiar white shirt, holding a bouquet of white carnations identical to hers. He saw her, his eyes lighting up, a smile breaking across his face like summer sunshine. Emma, he called, his voice hoarse with emotion, hurrying toward her. She stood still, letting him approach, and when he was just steps away, she smiled, a genuine smile, free of fear's shadow. You're here early, she said, her tone light with a hint of teasing. Liam laughed, scratching his head sheepishly. I didn't want you to wait, he replied. Not ever again. They stood there amid the bustle of the crowd, gazing at each other as if the 4 years apart had never happened. Liam held up his bouquet, hesitant. I grew it in New York. I brought it back because I thought you'd like it. Emma took it, her fingers brushing the petals, then glanced at the ring on her hand. You kept your word, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Liam nodded, his eyes brimming with feeling. I told you I wouldn't miss you again. They didn't rush to leave the airport. Instead, Liam took her hand, leading her to a car he'd rented, and they drove to the garden behind Margaret's house, where it all began. On the way, he told her about the past year, how he'd worked tirelessly to resolve the company crisis, how he'd turned down an offer to stay in New York to return here, and how he'd grown carnations each night to remember her. Emma listened, her hand intertwined with his, feeling a warmth she'd thought she'd never reclaim. When they reached the garden, the sun was high, illuminating the white carnations Emma still tended. Liam stopped in the middle, turning to her, his eyes flickering with nerves but steady with resolve. Emma, he said, his voice warm and low, I'm not good with fancy words, but I've thought about this moment for a whole year. He knelt, pulling a small ring box from his pocket, not the ring she wore, but a new one, simple, engraved with the word forever. I won't promise you the world, he said, his voice trembling with emotion, because I know it's not perfect. But I promise to give you my world, every day I live, everything I have, to love and protect you. Emma, will you marry me? Emma looked at him, tears streaming down her cheeks, but this time they were tears of joy. She remembered Margaret's letters, her words, look into his eyes and you'll know. Liam's eyes now weren't those of the weak boy who'd left, but of a man ready to stay. She nodded, her voice choked. Yes. Not for the past, but for the present and the future. Liam rose, slipping the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms. They embraced amid the carnations, under gentle sunlight, as if all the pain had melted away, leaving only love and healing. Thank you, he whispered into her hair. Thank you for giving me a chance. Emma smiled, resting her head on his chest. Thank you for coming back. A few months later, the the Carnation Garden became the setting for their small wedding. Emma and Liam didn't want anything extravagant. They invited only a few close friends and neighbors who'd known Margaret, keeping it simple as she had lived. Emma wore a long white dress, holding a bouquet of white carnations, while Liam wore a plain black suit with a small carnation pinned to his chest. They set up a small table in the garden, placing a photo of Margaret taken on a sunny afternoon, smiling kindly amid the flower beds. Beside it stood the carnation pot Liam had left before going to New York, now flourishing into a full bush, a testament to his promise. As the priest recited the vows, Emma and Liam held hands, their eyes locked. "I promise to stay by your side, never leaving, through rain or shine," Liam said, his voice steady. Emma smiled, replying, "I promise to trust you, not because you're perfect, but because you're you." As they exchanged rings, a soft breeze rustled the carnations, as if Margaret were smiling down from somewhere. After the ceremony, they cut the cake, laughed with their guests, and planted a new row of carnations together in the garden, a start to their shared life. Emma looked at Liam, then at Margaret's photo, whispering inwardly, "Auntie, you were right. Love always finds a way back." That night, after the guests had gone, Emma and Liam sat on the armchair in the house, hand in hand. On the table lay their wedding invitation, a small line etched in the corner. "Love always finds a way back." Emma leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of the man who'd once left, but would now stay forever. Liam kissed her forehead, whispering, "I'm home." The story closed in the Carnation Garden, a place that had witnessed an unfinished love, the pain of separation, and finally a complete reunion. Margaret was no longer there, but her legacy, love, patience, and faith lived on in Emma and Liam. They hadn't just found each other again. They'd found themselves in a perfect circle of healing. Thank you for following this heartfelt story of Soul Stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish the beautiful moments of life and love together.